for a couple of our committee members, but they are very familiar with this opening preamble that we must give. So I don't think they'll be too upset if we miss that. But I call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 40 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Just a couple of reminders. I'm sure our witnesses have been through this before, but just in case you have not, today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Just so you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Screenshots or photos of your screen is not permitted. Just for the benefit of the witnesses, members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. If interpretation is lost, I will just ask you to pause. I'll stop the clock, and then we will resume once we have interpretation back for the proceedings. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you. For those of you who are in the room, you know that your microphone will automatically come on. But for those on Zoom specifically, just wait till I recognize you to unmute. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly for the benefit of our translation. And a reminder to all comments and witnesses from the members and witnesses to put your comments through the chair. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connections and tests for the witnesses, one of the following witnesses did not complete the required connection test, and that was Kathleen Donahue. So I want to thank the witnesses for coming to committee on relatively short notice for this study on the Ukraine goods remission order. Welcome to panel number one. I would welcome our witnesses here today. From the Department of Finance, we have Michel Gauvier, Director General, International Trade Policy Division, as well as Yannick Bunde, Director, Trade and Tariff Policy, International Trade Policy Division. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, we have Doug Forsyth, Director General, Market Access, as well as Blair Hines, Deputy Director, Supply Managed Trade Controls Division. You will for each department, you'll be given 5 minutes for your opening remarks and hopefully shed a bit of light on this issue for our committee members. I will just raise my hand when you have 1 minute left, just as a 1 minute warning, and then you can carry on with the last minute, and then we will move on to questions from our committee members. So thank you very much again for being with us today, and I will now invite Ms. Munday and Gauvier to begin, and your time starts.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, one.
I'm in the process of switching some staff. I got a new team member in today, so I believe I would ask for unanimous consent if I could have my incoming and outgoing staff, who's first and last week, are here at the same time.
So unanimous consent to have an extra staff member from Mr. Lewis's office. Any concerns? No, passed. Thanks. Now, Ms. Gauvier and Ms. Munday, please begin. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to speak before this committee today. My name is Michel Gauvier. I am the Director General of the International Trade Policy Division at the Department of Finance. I'm joined by Yannick Bunde, who is the Director for Trade and Tariff Policy. Our division is responsible for Canada's import policy, including measures related to the customs tariff and the Special Import Measures Act. I am here to speak about the Ukraine goods remission order and will provide some context as to the rationale, process, and key features of the order, as well as the results of our close and regular import monitoring, including on the imports of supply-managed goods. The Ukraine goods remission order was introduced in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has caused widespread human suffering and destruction. L'invasion de l'Ukraine par la Russie avec
The invasion of the Ukraine by Russia through Belarus had repercussions on the entire economy. These repercussions include important effects on the economy, its capacity to export its goods into other countries. In response, Canada has cooperated closely with its allies to impose sanctions, severe sanctions, and to continue to offer humanitarian and financial support to the Ukraine. Canada has hired over $500 million in support, military and other. This will include a direct financial of $2 billion to the Ukrainian government. This money has already been disbursed, and the government continues to function. Within the parameters of its reply, they've also responded to the goods remission orders on imports coming from Ukraine. This measure was taken by way of a temporary goods remission order, 9th of June, 1922, and will expire at 1 year time.
Concerted effort with Canada's allies who have taken similar measures. Notably, the European Union implemented comprehensive tariff relief for goods not already covered by its free trade agreement with Ukraine. The United Kingdom reduced all tariffs on goods imported from Ukraine to zero and removed all quotas. And the U.S. has also taken the step of removing Ukraine from its 25% Section 232 tariffs applied to steel. Canada's remission order temporarily lifts remaining customs duties on Ukrainian imports, for example, supply-managed agricultural goods, passenger vehicles, and sugar, and makes it easier for importers to meet the rules of origin and shipping requirements when importing into Canada. Canada and Ukraine enjoy a positive and growing trade relationship. The Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, or CUFTA, came into force in 2017 and is the ongoing subject of modernization negotiations. Canada's two-way trade with Ukraine has expanded by 17% from 2017 to 2021 to $446 million annually. While the remission complements these important steps, the remission is temporary, and there are no plans to consider any permanent changes under the FTA. We are also mindful of the importance of tariffs as a key pillar in Canada's supply management system, and that providing such temporary duty-free access to supply-managed goods is unprecedented. In considering this measure, we assess the potential for exports from Ukraine. In general, it was assessed that the scope for Ukrainian businesses to start exporting meaningful quantities of supply-managed goods to Canada could be hindered by the current conflict situation, the short time frame for the remission of 1 year, and the lack of recent exports to Canada and associated business ties. Over the period from June 9th, when the order came into force, and November 23rd, imports of supply-managed goods have been limited to one importation of supply-managed products, which was ice cream, with a value for duty of $6,000. We are aware of concerns over the prospect that imports could increase, particularly related to chicken. The department is working closely with other departments to track the level of imports, including in the over-access supply-managed goods, and to promptly identify imports that could have an impact on domestic producers. If imports in meaningful quantities are detected, we will ensure that any risks and impacts to domestic producers are assessed and considered in a timely way, while being mindful of the intended purpose of the measure. Further, we would reinforce that in light of the exceptional nature of the current conflict and situation in Ukraine, the precedential risk of this order is very low. In sum, the remission order was part of a broader Canadian response to the invasion of Ukraine, intended to support its economy, and undertaken as part of a concerted effort with allies. We are closely monitoring its impacts, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gouvier, and I would be remiss if I didn't also welcome Mr. Cannings to the committee today, subbing in for our colleague, Mr. McGregor. So welcome to the Agriculture Committee. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Hines. You have 5 minutes as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Pleasure to be here this afternoon to discuss the Ukraine Goods Remission Order. As noted, I'm the Director General for Market Access Bureau at Global Affairs Canada. I would like to acknowledge that my team and I are joining you today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. J'aimerais axer mes remarques préliminaires sur le rôle joué par Affaires mondiales Canada.
My preliminary remarks will be on the department's approach to the supply-managed goods.
It's on three separate pillars: production controls, pricing controls, and import controls. Global Affairs Canada administers the import controls. Most importantly, we administer Canada's various tariff rate quotas for supply-managed goods, or TRQs. A TRQ is a quota implemented as a result of Canada's commitment within various free trade agreements. It establishes a quantity of a product that may be imported at a lower or within access rate of duty. Controls for supply-managed goods and their associated TRQs are implemented and administered under the Export and Import Permits Act, which requires that imports of supply-managed goods be authorized through the use of a permit. For imports of supply-managed goods, there are two types of permits. The first is an individual import permit, which applies to a specific shipment of goods and allows the importer to claim the within-access rate of duty. This type of permit is issued to allocation holders under Canada's various TRQs. Les entités appliquent directement auprès
They apply directly to Global Affairs Canada for these individual import licenses for those under supply management conditions. Once the information has been collected, the permits are issued through an integrated digital system, including CSBA access for the control of these imports.
called a General Import Permit, which is a regulation issued under the authority of the Import Permits Act, which allows a resident of Canada to import control goods subject to the terms and conditions of the regulation. These regulations allow for the import of supply-managed goods at the higher over-access rate of duty, and in certain cases, limited volumes of imports for personal use at the lower within-access rate of duty. From an administrative standpoint, the key difference between these two permits is how an applicant obtains and uses the permit and volume of goods that can be imported. As stated, for individual import permits, there's an application, which in turn requires a decision by Global Affairs Canada, and if approved, information is shared between Global Affairs Canada and the Canada Border Services Agency to ensure the efficient completion of the clearance process. Additionally, under shipment-specific permits, there is a limit on the quantity of goods that can be imported under the permit and the TRQ itself. With general import permits for supply-managed goods, there's no application to or decision by Global Affairs Canada. An entity importing under the authority of a general import permit must simply cite its use on their import documentation. Furthermore, there is no limitation on the volume of goods that can be imported at the over-access rate of duty under a GIP, or General Import Permit. Mr. Chair, in closing, I would like to state that while the issuance of the remission order temporarily alters the long-standing environment under which import controls for certain supply-managed goods functions, Global Affairs Canada, along with governmental partners, remain committed to ensuring the long-term health of our supply management system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. We'll now go to the committee members for questions. For the Conservatives, Monsieur Lehoux, pour 6 minutes, please, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for being with us this afternoon. My first question will be addressed to the person responsible for finance. You said that you've worked in partnership and consulted. Have all the significant stakeholders been consulted before the acceptance of this? Well, the goods remission order was sought in a very rapid fashion under exceptional circumstances. We spoke with the major stakeholders, and yes, you said that you did a bit of evaluation prior. Did you calculate specifically how much product might be imported into Canada? Well, we didn't do specific quantum for products, except perhaps for supply management goods. We did evaluate, and we did publish an economic impact report, $2.6 million of uncollected duties, tariffs. Well, several countries have closed their doors to these products. Do you not fear that we may have more goods coming in from these countries than we actually need? In your analysis, that is. Well, just to clarify, because other countries may have stopped accepting these goods, I don't know if that was part and parcel of our analysis. Perhaps JC had given consideration to the positions of other countries, but we did not. Okay? So, to Global Affairs Canada, a simple question. The environmental footprint. We talk a lot about it here in the House of Commons. Was this a consideration in issuing these good remissions orders. Some of the goods pretty well qualified, classified, but are there not other countries, perhaps closer by, that Canada could have supported that country in this process? We're talking about food products for the most part. Perhaps some of Ukraine's neighbors might have benefited from an environmental point of view, the carbon footprint. Two factors are mentioned quite often in the last 6 months here. Yes, the question was addressed to GAC. GAC.
Oh, I thought it was just come on. Okay, all right. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. I think that as we did our internal analysis in terms of whether or not types of support that we would provide, types of information that we would provide as the decision was being made, no, there was no decision with respect to the carbon footprint of their environmental impact in terms of what exporting the goods into the Canadian market would have. No.
Mais sur la question de l'insécurité alimentaire,
But food insecurity, would you not have thought of that before signing off on this order?
Second part of the question as well. So absolutely, that was part and parcel of the overall government response to the Ukraine situation, and looking at how we could provide help and what type of assistance we could provide globally in and around that area. And food security was top of mind. Global food security was top of mind in terms of our overall government reaction.
je poursuis avec le ministère des...
I'll follow up with the External Affairs Minister, or department, I should say. Was the department aware that the major country that exports chicken, about 70% of Ukrainian production, doesn't even belong to Ukrainian nationals? It's, do you know who own that? And how are we helping Ukraine in this fashion if it's an outside country which owns the company?
Sorry. Don't know all the familiarities with the company that is exporting. I think the idea is that companies that are exporting from Ukraine are providing value added in the Ukraine market. Ukrainian people are working at those companies, so I think that's where it would come from. But we don't have a lot of detailed information about particular companies that might be benefiting from the remission order.
On est, en fin de compte, vous étiez au fait là, que...
Well, you were aware, I suppose, that the exporter, the most significant exporter of chicken from the Ukraine, is not a Ukrainian-owned corporation or company. You were aware of that?
Je peux peut-être essayer d'ajouter à la réponse.
If I could perhaps answer a part of that question. Ukraine's their remission order, the objective is to assist Ukraine. So we're not looking at the beneficial proprietor of the outfit, but the economic results for Ukrainian economy.
Now to Mr. Drouin for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses that we have before us this afternoon. My first question for Finance, you mentioned initially that you did an analysis with supply-managed goods that would be imported in the 5 or 6 last years, and if I understood, you're in $6,000 in lost. Well, that was just recently, 9th of June and the 23rd of November. $6,000 in tariffs that we did not collect. Yes, that's correct. So you are evaluating the incoming goods and the value lost. And this would be, what did you say, 1 year expiry? 9th of June next year. Yes, it's a 1 year interim order. Okay, so they have 6 months or so left, 7 months. Global Affairs Canada.
General imports permit, and you've highlighted the difference. What was the rationale for using a general import permit as opposed to TRQs?
So the general import permit is for over quota access. That's what you would use it for. In this case, because there is no TRQ for this particular good at this point in time, or there's no need to use a TRQ, the importer would use a general import permit as opposed to you don't need an allocation, in fact, now to import the product.
Okay. So in general, it could be, if somebody wanted, they could import as many products as they want to Canada?
It's subject to if they're allowed to import it. Yes, there are other import regulations and rules, and you'll hear from some of our other colleagues later about that, but yes.
Yeah, and I think, that question would be to CBS on how they monitor, but specifically once GAC issues the general import permit, then your role for monitoring stops there. It's CBSA that would do the monitoring of what comes in?
Correct. They would have the information when the goods are entered into into Canada. That's right.
Okay. So if obviously, I don't think the goal is to displace our supply managed sector, but if the imports were suddenly we're caught off guard and the imports are extremely high, Canada would be in a position to determine, yes, the imports are extremely high and we are displacing the marketplace.
Yeah, I can answer that. I mean, our monitoring is intended to look to see what the imports are looking like and whether they potentially get to a level that might cause concern. So we are looking at that, and an assessment would be done at that time to see if there's any action that could potentially be needed. Of course, being balanced with the overall intention of the remission order as well.
Okay. And I know because of the urgency, you've said you didn't have the opportunity to necessarily consult prior to, but are you talking to the sector right now, or?
We have not had much engagement with the sector. I know they've been in touch with different officials, not directly with Department of Finance officials, though. But we're certainly open to having any conversations and welcome any information they would want to provide in terms of potential import risks that we should be looking at.
Okay, and same thing for you at Global Affairs?
Exactly. We haven't had any direct discussions with any of the stakeholders, but we're absolutely open to having those discussions and to continuing to monitor the situation.
Okay. Great. Well, how much time, Mr. Chair? Still have got 2 minutes. Okay. I want to go back to the analysis financier. Je vais parler en français. La dernière analyse que vous avez faite pendant.
The last analysis that you've done, above and beyond that $6,000, and so in the Ukraine, there seemed to be little interest because of the tariffs that were in place. Is that correct? Yes, that is. So, yep, it comes under supply management, so we didn't need to import. Ice cream, $6,000 over 6 months. Well, do you feel that there might be major imports of other goods? We mentioned the major chicken exporter in Ukraine, but you would know who might be exporting from the Ukraine specifically. We're working quite closely with other departments who do have responsibilities mentioned by my colleague from External Affairs, particularly food, but agriculture department has a role as well, of course, because of supply management. So we do get a heads up once in a while. Well, I think it would be important, particularly for the supply managed sector. They need imports in some cases as the input materials for further processing. And they wouldn't be against the government supporting Ukraine, but we just want to ensure that there is, so they can have some predictability in the marketplace, because they need a rate of return for the producers. I don't know how many chickens might be involved. I don't know what the cycle is for chicken production here, but thank you very much for your testimony.
Mr. Joanne.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin, for your questions. Mr. Perron, 6 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Chair, and I thank the witnesses for being here. Much appreciated. And from the outset, I'd like to mention that everyone agrees with the support to Ukraine, but the how is the devil in the details. So there might be other ways of doing it. So my questions will bear in that direction. And we're going to hear from other witnesses later, and we'll see what they have to say as well. I'll begin with Madame Gauvier. You mentioned in your preliminary remarks, and you've repeated it a little bit later in response to a question. So there have not yet been imports. But if all of a sudden we were faced with major importations, you will evaluate the situation. How do you determine what is a large quantity of imports? Because supply management sector does need some imports in order to do their further processing, so could be a problem. Well, of course, we will be working in close collaboration with other departments, obviously, because Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, if we see that there's an import that's going to be problematic, we will have a discussion to see how this would impact the supply management sector, if it was to create problems or not. But there has to be a good balance between the intent of the remission order, and we want the Ukrainian population as a whole to benefit from the activity. But we have... Well, that sounds a bit vague. Perhaps we could start discussing with the sector, the supply management sector, what might prove to be a problematic quantum amount of import. Well, when this measure was formalized in June, we did establish with the departments who do have expertise, Agriculture Canada, of course, as to what we should be looking for. And of course, CBSA will be collecting all the data, and we'll know what's coming in. We can identify them as supply management goods, or they will be by the agency, and we can see what levels we're hitting. But I'm talking about consultation with the sector, and perhaps I can see that you didn't have too much contact with the producers themselves, for example, eggs, chicken, milk. Yes, it would be useful. We will be doing that. And what kind of measures do you think you might take? You agree with the sector, the industry, and whoops, too much came in, it's going to destabilize the industry or the sector. What would be the repercussions? What would be the reaction? Well, what we do depends on what we see. But first of all, it's a reimbursement of the remissions. We were able to enact this very, very quickly as a regulation, and I think if it had to be adjusted, we could do that with some sense of urgency as well, in order to ensure that disequilibrium didn't last too long. But that's a government decision, not bureaucrats. $2.6 million just in ice cream. That's what I understood. No, that's not quite what I said. 17,000 that was not collected. And the 2.6 million is an estimate for the entire year for the whole range of all products. 2.6 in uncollected. So, but for ice cream, it was 6,000. Well, this is only supply managed goods. There were other goods imported at the same time. $732,000 in. Well, 2.6 million. That seems to be a considerable number. You should be discussing that with the industry. Do you have any number of importers in Canada that would like to import supply management. We have not had any contact with Canadian importers on that score. Oh, how would you explain that supply managed goods were not covered in 2019, and there was no exceptions made, but recently, 21, 22, we're in a big hurry to promote these imports. Is that just a happenstance? Or does it usually take 3 years to? Oh, that's the next question. Well, okay. To what degree can we be ensured that the products which are imported, we heard from my colleague that a foreign owner of this Ukrainian production facility, how can we ensure that these products actually are Ukrainian products, or they're not under territory that's being occupied right now by foreign power? Well, there is a definition in the remission order based on the last section of the rules of origin. Anyway, minimal, if you will, rewrap or something like this, or those measures are excluded. But what was the last location of production, so that the last phase of production actually occurred in the Ukraine? Okay.
Colleagues, if you're asking a question and the witnesses are taking over your time to answer, I'm just going to let them answer. I think we're all here to try and get as much clarification, as much information as we can. So I'm not going to cut off our witnesses to answer their question. If you're keeping an eye on the clock and it goes a little long, I want to allow our witnesses to finish their responses as best we can. Time shouldn't be a big issue today. Now to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Always do that. Well, thank you for being here today, and this is all quite interesting. I just want to make sure that I understand the whole process that's involved here. I assume this remission order was made to help Ukraine, in its situation, and was it just a general removal of most or all tariffs that we would normally charge? So there wasn't an analysis of sector by sector of what would help Ukraine the most?
It was a blanket removal.
Right.
So many of our tariffs are already at zero as a result
Right.
of our free trade agreement with Ukraine, but there were some categories, including in the supply managed goods, that still have tariffs. So, so those were all brought to zero. I would say, therefore, we did not target any particular sectors or do analysis in order to be able to target, though we were trying to be aware of what sensitivities there may be in moving it forward.
So with particular with the supply managed sectors, do we know where Ukraine was exporting those products? And I assume very little or none was coming to Canada before. And are those markets compromised because of the war? Or, I mean, is there some pressure, I'm trying to get at, on Ukraine to develop new markets and perhaps Canada? I guess I'm trying to find out, does Ukraine have a real reason to send these products to Canada now?
You're correct that there were no imports coming in before that just because of the tariffs that were in place. We were aware of interests from our negotiations with Ukraine in certain products. I can't speak to the whole of their trade interests. Obviously, they're very close to the European Union, and so I think that is an important market for them. And as I noted in my remarks, the European Union also took measures to remove tariffs from Ukraine. So I don't know that they have pressure from that side. I can't say for all of their trading partners whether there are other pressures that are arising that might be driving them towards Canada as a partner.
And, as you monitor the situation in the Ukraine, is there any sense of how production has been perhaps compromised of some of these materials? And also how has the domestic market within Ukraine been affected? I'm just trying to get at, you know, how much pressure there is on exporting these materials out of Ukraine to Canada.
No, those are good questions that I would like to have answers to. I'm afraid that the situation, I mean, I think going into it, we knew that the conflict was going to have implications for Ukraine's economy and its ability to export to Canada. And I believe exports actually declined quite a lot in the first half of the year. But with respect to these particular products and the particular companies that are in question, we don't have the details on that. I don't know if others want to add.
Thanks. If I could just add a little bit to that, and yes, you're absolutely right. The situation in Ukraine itself is very difficult for companies, for their citizens, of course, and so that has had an impact on what they can produce. It's also had an impact on, you know, what type of intelligence we would have in the marketplace on the trade commissioner side of things. So we don't have people in market that would be able to provide all of that information. But I think my colleague from finance has indicated quite a bit of the current intelligence that we have that they would be looking first to Europe, European Union, just because it is the closest market, and not necessarily to Canada as a primary, even secondary market.
And just to kind of wrap up this line, basically you're monitoring the situation. I don't know what the timeline is on when you said you would look at situations, and if you see big spikes, you could maybe change. Is that monitoring ongoing, and would there be a situation where you'd say, you know, we don't really need to have these supply managed goods on this list, we can take them off because there seems to be absolutely no interest or no ability to export?
I'll respond with respect to the monitoring. We receive data right now on a monthly basis that we then disseminate, we disseminate in aggregates and by tariff line to our colleagues at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and at Global Affairs as well, amongst other federal partners. But it was always noted from the start that if some problematic products start to appear in certain quantities, that we're going to just increase the frequency of this monitoring to biweekly, weekly, however we need to. At this time, we're doing it monthly because there are no major issues that have come up.
Right.
I think the second part of your question was whether we might discontinue the measure with respect to supply managed goods if there's no interest in the market. We haven't considered that. I think we would want to leave it open. I would say that yes, there is a risk that if a large quantity of products are coming in, that could potentially cause problems, but perhaps in more modest amounts it would not, and yet it would still provide a benefit for Ukraine.
Right.
So I think we would want to leave that open for that kind of potential scenario.
Okay, thanks.
You have about 30 seconds left.
I'll leave it then. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cannings. We'll now move on to our second round of questions, and now to Ms. Rood for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for appearing here today. Just a couple quick questions. Could we have had the remission order intact without including supply managed goods?
Yes, there is discretion to do it on a subset of products.
Okay. Do you know how much poultry Ukraine produces compared to Canada?
I don't have that figure. I don't know if my colleagues would. Perhaps in the next session? Yeah. I think Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada might have that information.
Okay. Thank you very much. So was the decision to add supply managed goods to the order a political decision, or did it come from an idea from the department?
I wouldn't really want to comment on the process towards getting to a decision. We provide information on what the potential action could be and what the implications are, and decisions go from there. But I wouldn't comment on kind of the briefing process.
Okay. Who would trigger the conversation of how much is too much chicken supply to come into Canada? Would that be the Department of Agriculture, or is that Finance?
I think we would have that discussion together. I think Agriculture Canada is more familiar with the implications of, what particular quantities might have effects on the supply management system, and so we definitely want their expertise, but I think we'd want to be part of that conversation as well.
So in those conversations, would there have been, going into those conversations, though, would you have decided on what the threshold should be for allowing a supply managed product into Canada as part of this order before going ahead with the order?
No, we did not establish thresholds that would kind of trigger one thing or another ahead of the order.
Okay. You mentioned that the impact on tariffs to be about 2.6 million, but I'm just wondering if you've done an assessment on what the economic impact would be to our producers and our farmers, especially in supply managed sectors.
So that, just to reiterate, the 2.6 million is with respect to all products, so not just agricultural products.
But that's tariffs on products, correct?
Yes, that's the tariffs.
So I'm just
the
wondering
tariffs
if you
on.
did an assessment on what the economic impact to the actual producers would be, not tariffs, but on the producers themselves.
I mean, we did not do a fulsome economic impact assessment on all of the different sectors that could potentially be implicated by this. I think we had a general sense of where the imports could come from and the sectors that could be affected, but didn't get down to that level of granular detail in the time that we had.
Okay. Was the CFIA consulted prior to supply management being added onto the list, onto the order?
We engaged with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. I'm not sure whether, we did not directly with CFIA.
Okay.
I am not sure whether AAFC did at the time or not.
Or CBSA? Were they consulted?
CBSA was consulted because they administer these types of measures. We always make sure to engage with them so they're prepared for it.
Okay. I'm just wondering if the tariff relief explicitly was it requested by Ukraine, or was this something that Canada did on its own?
Canada did so. I mentioned other partners that had also taken these measures, so I would say it was kind of a collective measure between us and like-minded partners, including the EU, UK, and a measure by the US as well. I believe Ukraine had identified an interest in various economic measures that could help its situation. I can't remember specifically if this was one. I apologize, but it's possible that they did. So I shouldn't rule it out, but I don't recall exactly.
Okay. Well, and just to note, like, countries like the EU don't have supply managed sectors in their countries. It's something that is unique to Canada, and so by, from what we've heard today, hearing that the EU has an impact on what Canada does and not taking into account that we have supply management, it sounds like we're allowing other countries like the EU to actually have more control over our own supply managed system here in Canada than we do in Canada with some of these things.
Can I address that, though, quickly?
Sorry?
Can I address that quickly?
Sure.
Just to say, yes, I mean, there's no supply management system in those countries, but there are areas of sensitivity, and these were broad-based measures, both by the EU and the UK. The US one was more narrow, but also in a sensitive area of steel. So just to say there are different considerations that the countries have to take in doing these types of measures, and we weren't simply, following one or the other. It was a self-assessment as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Rood. Thank you very much. Now to Ms. Taylor-Roy via video conference. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I just wanted to start by establishing some facts as I understood them. This Special Import Measures Act, the remission order, came into force on the 9th of June, 2022. Is that correct?
Special Import Measures Act is a different law. It's just the remission order, which
Okay, so remission order.
Yeah.
Okay. And how much has been imported in the approximately 6 months since it came into effect?
Total imports in that time was a value of 8.55 million.
8.55 million. Was any of that in the supply managed sector?
Just that one importation I referred to earlier, the importation of ice cream.
The ice cream.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's been one importation in 6 months. And this is supposed to be in effect for 1 year, according to the remission order? It's applicable for 1 year?
Yes.
Okay, so we're halfway through it and there's been one import of ice cream. Basically. Okay, and will the imports under this affect our supply managed sector's quotas at all?
Thank you for the question. No, I don't see the importations affecting the quotas at all. No, these the importations under the remission order would be over quota importations, so no effect on the quotas themselves.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand what the concern, like, obviously our supply managed sector is very important, and I have a cousin with a chicken farm. We know how important this protection is, but I also know that in the fall economic statement, Minister Bebeau has just allocated $1.7 billion, I believe, to the sector to compensate for anything that, any impact under CUSMA, and that we've, said we're going to basically protect this sector from impacts under imports. So what do you have any concern about the impact of this measure on the supply managed sector?
At this stage, knowing what we know, I would say no. I think the risks that have been brought forward and the concerns that have been brought forward are something we need to monitor to see if there is the potential that there could be some risks. But as I've said, we are really trying to monitor things very closely and stand ready to kind of make those assessments and react if need be.
Okay. And do you feel the government is ready and prepared to offset any damage or anything that happens as a result of this to the supply managed sectors, especially the chicken and egg sector?
That's not something that's being considered right now. I know that's been done in the context of various free trade agreements. I don't think we're at that point. We don't see the kind of importations at this point that would warrant that discussion.
Okay, so you don't think that there's going to be damage from this that would warrant that kind of compensation?
From what we see now.
From what you see now. Okay, very good. And do you see any other issues? Like, it seems to me that we don't have a lot of data since there's only been one import in the half year that this has been in place. And we don't really have much data to go on in terms of what impact this has had on the sector. And we only have 6 months left to go with this. So with this remittance order. So are there any other aspects of it that concern you?
This sector in particular, I would say no. I think people have kind of raised, some possible concerns, and those are the types of things that we're certainly trying to track. We haven't seen anything else beyond that has given us cause for concern at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you much, Ms. Taylor-Roy. And now, Monsieur Perron, for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll pick it up. You mentioned earlier when you were asked a question on the eventuality of taking out the supply managed goods if ever it's renewed, or you're going to keep the remission order open, including supply management. Do you really think it's going to be renewed after the next 9th of June, or is it really going to come to an end? Well, perhaps I misunderstood the original question. We have no intention of renewing this interim order. It will be 2023. And if it were to be renewed, do you think you might take out the supply managed goods? Well, that'll be part of the discussions and negotiations. It depends what the situation is at the time. Or at least discuss with the productive sector to see what can be done without destabilizing the system. Yes, of course. In my earlier round of questions, I said, can we be sure that it is coming from Ukraine and not somewhere else? Or perhaps under occupied Ukrainian territory. We want to help the Ukrainians, not the occupier. Could there be measures taken or goods that the profits might end up with the Russians? Well, for the zones under Russian control, it's prohibited for imports to come in from those regions. Okay. And that you will keep monitoring the situation closely. There's been no imports of chicken, yes, some ice cream, of course. We know that CFIA is always checking on the control of these food products. Have you had any consultations with representations of, federations of agricultural producers or whatever? Well, there is a big interest, and we haven't. Oh, perhaps at the ministerial level, the minister's office has had conversations, but we have not. Thank you.
2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And I just want to, perhaps you've answered this before, and it's been a lot of numbers and things coming at me, and I know this was a very rapid, I guess, decision to bring in the remission order, but perhaps Mr. Forsyth might be best to answer this, and that's, was there any analysis done before, or has there been some analysis done on how much chicken imports would increase into Canada, for instance, or how many, what's the effect on other markets, the EU market? Has there been an increase there? I'm just trying to get at, we're all trying to help Ukraine, but is this the best way? But just, has there been some analysis on how this might have helped Ukraine overall, our efforts and the EU's?
So, thank you for the question. Our department hasn't done any of that type of analysis. I don't think. Have you guys done? It might be for the next group of officials to ask them if they. I think they probably best placed to answer that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would say the same thing. We didn't specifically look at that and who was benefiting. I mean, we're aware of the companies that are there, but as we've heard, they're not certified just yet, and so it's a little bit hard to have a good understanding of what those impacts might be.
And is there any sense, again, say with the poultry market, of how much additional imports from Ukraine would be necessary before there would be some significant impact on prices, like say to consumers and producers here, or it's supply managed, so I'm assuming the producers are getting a set price, but how is that whole market affected by this?
Yeah. Okay. I would think that the next group of officials would be best placed to answer that, but I don't think we're talking about that type of importations that would have any impact in the marketplace like that. There would not be that level of imports. That's
right. And
sorry, Mr. Canning.
I'm out.
Time.
Thank you.
Now, last to Mr. Nader for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you kind of avoided answering the question from my colleague Ms. Rood earlier, Madame Gauvier. But the decision to include supply management wasn't obligatory. Supply management didn't have to be included in the remission order. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So it was a decision made by someone. Was a decision made by the minister on the recommendation of the department, or was a decision made by the minister on her own reasoning?
Ultimately, the minister is the one taking the decision and makes the recommendation to the governor and council, and that's how it comes into force. So, ultimately, the decision is the minister's.
Did the department recommend supply management be included?
This is what I do not feel very comfortable talking about. This is the decision-making process within government. As I said, we provided advice on the different elements that could be included because it includes both tariffs as well as trade remedies duties. And we provided advice on those and the potential implications.
Okay, so you're not willing to give us the advice that you gave to the minister, and I can accept that. But you mentioned earlier that you're not aware of the size of the market in Ukraine, their production capability, and so you rely on departments such as Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food and perhaps CFIA to provide you advice as a department. So I'd be curious to know what advice you received from the departments that made you comfortable going ahead with including supply management.
I would say on the supply managed goods, as I think I may have noted before, we were aware that there was an interest in the chicken market from our free trade negotiations with Ukraine. On the scope and the exact nature of the interest, we did not have a lot of details. As I said, we did engage with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada on that, and they were aware of those same issues and raised them with us. And so those were things that we took into consideration as we move forward.
I would just note that there's always a great interest in our supply management sector beyond simply negotiations with Ukraine. I'd say there are many countries worldwide, and I think many of our trading partners are probably watching very quickly or very interestedly with the fact that at the first opportunity, do so, our supply management industry was opened up. Now, you mentioned that you may not know or have the information on the size of the market, but I would be curious to know if the Department of Finance has done any studies on what the impact of avian influenza would have financially on Canada were there to be a widespread outbreak within Canada. Does the Department of Finance have any information on the economic impact that would have?
I believe that would be for the CFIA, who are going to be appearing after
Well,
this.
then the follow-up, what is the size of the Canadian chicken market and the impact on the Canadian economy in Canada?
Of avian influenza?
No, just
Oh.
in general. What's the chicken, the benefit of the chicken industry in Canada on the economy?
Again, I think that would be for
No.
officials appearing.
This
If
is
you're
a
interested
question.
in knowing whether I have that information now, I do not.
Okay, and perhaps you could follow up with us from an economic impact, the impact of the chicken market in Canada. What does that impact economically? Because this is a big issue for a lot of farmers in a lot of communities across our country, and when they see, even if it's just a crack, even if it's just one aspect being opened up in the supply management situation. And I would just point as well, you mentioned that, as of this point, you're unsure of whether or not or how much chicken may be imported in the future. There's nothing in this that would prevent a back-end loading of this situation, in which a large amount is imported into Canada late in the period, in the time leading up to June of 2023, in which that chicken will come into Canada, will sit in freezers for a long period of time, and have an impact on our domestic market. I get the impression that you're relying on your partners in government, agriculture and agri-food in particular, but at the end of the day, this is a decision that is made by finance, and if you're making a decision with a relatively limited amount of information, I think it's concerning. I think it's concerning to a lot of farmers who may be paying attention. I'll leave my time there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nader. Now our final questioner, Mr. Lewis, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. Really appreciate you being here in this conversation. We are challenged in that the data is coming in, and it's early stages to have these conversations. You could feel people, straining to answer the questions, but the way I see it, we're sort of boiling it down to about three factors that Canada and other countries are supporting Ukraine with these remission orders. Secondly, we want to make sure that the economic impact on our supply management sector is minimal, and I would say it's, from what I've heard so far, it appears to be. And then third, we want to make sure that these imports, the food that's being imported, is safe. So maybe I could ask both the Department of Finance and Foreign Affairs, within your jurisdiction, the food safety thing would be for the next panel, do you think that the agreement that has been struck, do you think it strikes the balance, and are the measures in place to monitor the data to continue assessing?
So I would say I hope that we have found the right balance. Clearly we understand that there's concerns being raised here today, and we have been mindful of those, and that's why we wanted to put a monitoring system in place that is looking at things quite carefully. The overall purpose of the order was to provide benefit for Ukraine, so I think we can't lose sight of that. But as I said, it has to be balanced with what the impacts are here in Canada, and that's what the monitoring is intending to do.
May I ask the same question of the Foreign Affairs?
Thank you for the question. I think she handled it, my colleague handled it perfectly well. I don't think I could add anything to add. I think that's exactly the right balance we're looking for.
And then also, tariff relief, we're talking about, have we done this with other countries over the years? Have we done something similar with other countries in different times that you know of, that we have some data?
No, this is a fairly unique instance. Not just with respect to the supply management aspect, but having something where all imports from a particular country are affected, and I think that reflects the really unique circumstances we're in with respect to Ukraine.
And we're having conversations with other countries. Are we working kind of in step with other countries? You mentioned the EU, the U.S. We're having those conversations to learn from each other's remission orders?
We're in contact with those various countries through different mechanisms on a regular basis on the overall responses to Ukraine. So those conversations do continue.
And then finally, maybe I could ask just the general, the free trade agreement we have with Ukraine. What are the major sectors that our trade shares?
Well, the current free trade agreement that we have with Ukraine that was brought into force in August 2017, it covered basically goods, excluding supply management goods, of course. There have been efforts at modernizing that agreement, and we have been having ongoing discussions with Ukraine officials even before the war started to try and modernize that and to look at services investment and digital chapters and to make it more of a comprehensive FTA. And so those discussions are ongoing. Excludes goods. The goods portion of the free trade agreement is finished, and we are looking at now services, investment, and digital.
Thank you. I believe I've got about a minute left, Mr. Chair, but I just want to thank the witnesses. I appreciate this discussion and cede my time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Lewis. Since you're ceding your time, I just had one question. On the fact that, we talked a lot about the threshold and saying, why was a threshold not set beforehand, before you include supply management in this remission order, to provide some assurance to our producers who are obviously a little bit concerned with this? Would Finance and Ag Canada get together and say, this is a line we will not cross, have that consultation with producers and say, do you feel comfortable to import this amount of product at this amount of time? Why was that threshold not set beforehand? Maybe there's a reason.
I think there's a couple of things. I think first it is difficult to establish exactly what that threshold is, and perhaps my colleagues who will be appearing later from that department will have more to say on that. But also, it was done in a relatively expedient way, and so there was not perhaps as much opportunity to do some of the things that we've been asked about today in terms of analysis ahead of time. But it's certainly something that we're taking back and we'll be considering further as we go forward.
And maybe Trade, Foreign Affairs and Trade can answer this. Just so for my knowledge, some good questions from some colleagues is, on the ice cream, for example, it's my understanding that in the initial remission order, supply managed goods like poultry wasn't included, but there's going to be, or potentially, an export certificate signed, which will include. So we haven't had supply managed imports from June 9th till now because they weren't included. But now there's a potential decision to include supply managed with that export certificate is signed. Is that correct, or am I incorrect on that?
If I could, I'd probably just clarify a little bit. It's mostly correct. I think there are some processed dairy products that are allowed to come in to the country, and they have a certification process in place for those. There is not yet a certificate for poultry or eggs to come in. They haven't, and our CFIA colleagues will have some more information on that, but there is no export certificate in place yet for those products. So that's why there's no imports.
Well, thank you for the clarification on that, and appreciate everyone's time. Great job, colleagues. We'll now take a couple of minute break. Please don't wander off too far. Our officials can be excused. Thank you again for your time. We'll take 5 minutes, grab some food, and head back as quickly as you can. We'll just get our next panel set up on Zoom. back into session. I will try and condense the preamble here just so we can get going as quickly as possible. So, we only have about 45 minutes or so left, and I want to make sure the colleagues get as many questions in as possible. So we'll call this meeting to order for the second panel. Just a few reminders. We do have all of our witnesses on hybrid on Zoom today. So just for our witnesses, not that I expect you would, but no screenshots are permitted. Please speak in the official language of your choice. We do have translation. If there's an issue with translation, I will just put my hand up, ask you to stop, and we will commence once the translation is resolved. We do have one witness, Mr. Band, who does not have an official headset, so we will if we have some issues, we may have to address that. Ms. Donahue has changed her headset, and we do have hers is now, she has passed her test, so we are good to go. With us today as our witnesses, we have from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Tom Rosser, Assistant Deputy Minister, Market and Industry Services Branch, Marie-Noelle Desrochers, Acting Chief Agriculture Negotiator and Director General, Market and Industry Services Branch. From the Canada Border Services Agency, we have Mr. Band, Director General, Trade and Anti-Dumping Programs Directorate. I believe we also have from the Canada Food Inspection Agency, Kathleen Donahue, the Assistant Deputy Minister and Vice President, International Affairs, and Kanwal Koshar, Senior Director, Food Import and Export Division. Each department will have 5 minutes for your presentation, and then we will commence with the questions from my colleagues. So maybe we'll start with the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Mr. Rosser, I'll pass that over to you for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There had been an issue with my headset earlier. I've changed. I trust that you can hear me okay. C'est un grand honneur pour moi de prendre la parole.
It's a great pleasure and honor for me to apply before this committee to discuss the Ukrainian goods remission order, more particularly in what concerns the import tariff-free of supply good managed goods. Before beginning, allow me to give you a few facts on this system. The supply management system is a production system whereby dairy products, eggs, hatching eggs, turkey, and chicken are produced in Canada. The three pillars of this supply management system: planned production, administration of imports, Canadian consumers, producers rather, are ensured a decent return on their investments. And Canadians can depend on a reliable, foreseeable, and safe system. The agricultural sector in Canada has been responsible for $13 billion and thousands of jobs in the processing and production sectors. Milk processing, $4.8 billion in GDP, 19% of the manufactured or processed goods and foods in Canada.
Russia have had a significant effect on Ukraine's economy, including its ability to export goods to other countries. That's why the government has decided to temporarily waive tariffs and trade remedy duties on imports originating from Ukraine, including for supply managed products. The measure came into effect on June the 9th and will expire after 1 year. This means that supply managed products from Ukraine are eligible to enter Canada duty-free and quota-free until June of next year. As I highlighted before, supply management is based on planned domestic production, administered pricing, and controlled imports. Domestic requirements are established taking into account anticipated imports. Unpredicted imports may impact production planning, which is a pillar of the Canadian supply management system. We understand that the consequences of this measure may be a source of concern for supply managed sectors. Due to the lack of a finalized official meat inspection certificate, Ukraine has not exported any poultry products to Canada in the past. Since the implementation of the remission order, imports of supply managed goods have been limited to one shipment of ice cream. There were no Canadian imports of dairy products from Ukraine in the past 5 years. Given the low volumes of supply managed products that have been imported from Ukraine into Canada to date, and considering the various logistical challenges facing Ukraine, it's difficult to estimate the potential volume of imports during the term of the remission order. However, the government of Canada monitors the situation closely and will continue to engage with industry on potential or observed impacts throughout the duration of the remission order. In conclusion, it will be important for the government to continue to work collaboratively with the industry to ensure that the potential impact and challenges associated with the remission order are identified in a timely manner and understood. In that regard, AFC will continue to engage directly with dairy, poultry, and egg sector representatives to help address their concerns. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Rosser. Always succinct and well detailed. Thank you. Good to see you again as well. Now we'll go to Mr. Band from the CBSA for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Comme ça a mentionné, je suis Doug Band, directeur.
My name is Doug Band, Director General, Trade and Anti-Dumping Programs Directorate. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today on the issue of the Ukrainian goods remission order. If you'll allow, Mr. Chairman, I would like to give you an overview of this, the administration of these orders.
While most goods from Ukraine already enter Canada duty-free as a result of the free trade agreement, tariffs still apply on certain goods where they are being phased out under the agreement or where they are excluded from it. The CBSA is responsible for administering this remission order in accordance with the parameters and eligibility requirements outlined in the order. To assist importers on how to claim relief under the order, the CBSA has published in June a Customs Notice 2212 on its website. That notice lays out what goods imported into Canada are eligible for remission, what types of duties can be remitted, the time period within which remission is granted, 1 year, and it reiterates the requirements for goods to be originating from Ukraine. For all goods originating in Ukraine and imported into Canada, the order remits customs duties paid or payable under the customs tariff, as well as duties paid or payable under the Special Import Measures Act. The Special Import Measures Act, as members know, is the anti-dumping regime that governs CBSA's anti-dumping investigations to protect Canadian companies. Importers can claim remission of duties under these two acts for the period of 1 year, from June 9th, 2022 to 2023. As with the tax regime, Canada's customs duty regime is a voluntary self-assessment regime backstopped by CBSA monitoring and risk-based compliance verification after the goods have been imported. Importers of commercial goods may apply for relief of customs duties at the time of import by simply entering a special authorization code on their Canada Customs Code Form B3. In the case where importers overpay or do not claim remission when they were eligible, they can also seek a refund for remission under the order by filling out a B2 form. Thank you, and I look forward to answering the committee's questions. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I will now, for our final witnesses, Ms. Donahue, I will pass it over to you if you're doing the presentation for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Bonjour et merci à tous, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, and thank you all, and the members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. I'm here on behalf of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA. I'm the Vice President of International Affairs Branch, and I am accompanied today by my colleague, Director of Imports and Exports, Food Imports, Ms. Carol Kocher. My presentation will deal with the provision of important food products coming from Ukraine, raw and cooked chicken and other products which are under the administration of CFIA for food safety purposes. All products sold in Canada, be they manufactured domestically or imported, under a tariff or a TRQ or duty-free must comply with Canada's federal regulations. Where a non-compliance is identified, the CFIA takes immediate action, regardless of country of origin.
Are responsible to ensure the food they import is safe and that it meets Canadian requirements. Under the Safe Food for Canadians regulation, also known as SFCR, importers are required to source from foreign suppliers who manufacture, prepare, store, package, and label the food under conditions that provide at least the same level of protection as those in Canada. Meat, or poultry in this case, and animal byproducts such as eggs and dairy products are regulated by the Safe Food for Canadians regulations and the Health of Animal regulations. To import these products, the food safety as well as the animal health requirements outlined in the regulations must be met. La CIA a suivi.
CIA has followed its rigorous process before allowing the import of poultry from the Ukraine. This dealt with a on-site verification in 3 poultry facilities, and the inspection the review of the Ukrainian certification and monitoring of the problem, and the respect of our import. The CUFTA came into effect in 2017 and 2019. CFIA monitored the inspection systems for production of meat products in Ukraine. We continue to ensure that the safety, the food safety of these foods from another country, in this case the Ukraine, are effectively applied to the production and the export of those products, and to confirm that these controls correspond meet Canadian import requirements.
CFIA has been working with Ukrainian officials to allow for the export of raw and cooked poultry products from Ukraine to Canada. However, the completion of this work was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic and other competing priorities. Given the current situation in Ukraine, the CFIA has sought additional assurances regarding the food safety as well as the animal health controls in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials have assured that food safety and animal health standards and controls are still at the same level as they were at the time of the audit, and that Ukraine can inspect and certify exports as per the certificate conditions. Ukrainian exports continue into third countries, such as the European Union, which maintains strict food import requirements that are similar to Canada. New imports of any meat products from a newly approved establishment undergo full inspection by the CFIA for the first 10 shipments. Imports from Ukraine would also follow this process. Only compliant shipments will be released to the importer. Subsequent to that, the CFIA will continue ongoing monitoring of imports of poultry from Ukraine on a risk-based inspection approach, including sampling as well as testing. The CFIA has met with the Chicken Farmers of Canada and the Canadian Poultry and Egg Processors Council to discuss the impacts of the imports of poultry products from Ukraine under the remission order. There have been no previous imports of poultry from Ukraine. As such, Canada has requested pre-export certification data for type and volume of product on export shipments of poultry from Ukraine in an effort to help the Canadian industry better plan their domestic production. Ukraine officials have confirmed to the CFIA that they will share twice a week requested pre-export information with the CFIA and that it will be provided for every export certificate that is issued. In August of 2021, the CFIA...
Sorry, Ms. Donahue, you're past your 5 minutes. Can you wrap it up as quickly as you can here?
Okay,
Thank you.
I will do so. So in August 21, the CFIA also received a request from Ukraine for the export permit to allow for milk and dairy products. This certificate was finalized and approved back in July of 2022. This negotiated certificate means that Ukraine is able to export milk and dairy products to Canada. I would note, though, quickly that certain products such as cheese, ice cream, yogurt are not recognized as milk products under the Health of Animals regulations, and they have always been permitted from Ukraine without a certificate. Shellfish, under the SFCR, the import of egg and shellfish, shell eggs and processed eggs into Canada also requires certificate. On May of 2022, the CFIA received a request from Ukraine to negotiate a certificate for the export of these products, and this is something that we are looking into.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to have to.
And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I'm sure you would have had a chance to finish it from questions if you didn't, but
No worries.
I apologize for that, but we have a limited amount of time. Now to our questions from our colleagues. Ms. Rood for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for appearing today on this important topic. Just wondering if there's been an increase in imports of supply managed goods since the order was made. Does anybody have an answer to that?
I can take. I'll go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, I don't know if Mr. Chair, the members from the Ukraine, as Kathleen had indicated, we've seen no, other than the shipment of ice cream, no supply managed products have been imported from the Ukraine. In terms of overall trends in import of supply managed goods, I don't know offhand, but certainly would be happy to compile and share with the committee the latest available data.
Excellent, thank you. If you could table that information for us, that would be great. Ms. Donahue, you mentioned in your remarks that the last inspection that took place of critical infrastructure in Ukraine was in 2019, and you also mentioned that because of the pandemic, things were lagging, and now we have a war in Ukraine. So I'm just wondering, is the audit from 3 years ago still valid for a country at war? And what assurances can you give Canadians that what's actually happening in the processing plants? Specifically, if we look at chicken, when we have our own domestic supply of chicken readily available here, what assurances can you give Canadians that the inspections are still accurate there? Have you had somebody on the ground in Ukraine in recent months to make sure that what they're saying is true? And can you give Canadians assurance that today, that their safety of their food is not in jeopardy right now?
Thank you for your questions. The CFIA met with Ukrainian officials on October 18th, just last month, to seek assurances regarding the food safety as well as the animal health controls in Ukraine presently. Ukrainian officials assured the agency that food safety and animal health standards and controls are at the same level as they were at the time of the audit that was conducted in 2019, and that Ukraine inspects and certifies exports as per the certificate conditions. This was also reaffirmed in writing by Ukrainian officials to the agency following that meeting. Thank you.
So the answer to the question is no, you haven't actually put somebody on the ground in Ukraine to look themselves for Canadians. You are taking the word of people there right now. Do I understand that correctly?
We have not conducted a second audit.
Thank you very much. I understand, in Canada right now, we're worried about avian influenza happening and a potential for a threat with imported chicken from Ukraine, whether fresh or frozen, because we know that there is a big potential of bringing avian flu into Canada through meat brought in from Ukraine, and it can be transported in frozen food, and frozen food could be kept in refrigerator or in freezers here in Canada for a year. And I'm just wondering if there was consideration when allowing chicken to be included in this order, if that was a consideration at all.
Thank you very much for your question. In 2019, the CFI conducted its on-site evaluation and audit of Ukraine's poultry system, and leading to Canada recognizing Ukraine being free of highly pathogenic avian influenza. As part of that poultry meat evaluation, the CFIA requested to receive formal notification of avian influenza disease outbreaks in Ukraine. Canada did receive notifications of outbreaks of AEI directly from the Ukrainian competent authority in 2020 as well as in 2021. The last notification of an AI outbreak in poultry was received back in February of 2021. And a notification regarding wild birds was received back in March of 2021. Since then, there have been no further communication by Ukraine regarding any additional AI outbreaks. I would add that in addition, Ukraine is also a member of the World Organization's Animal Health, also known as WOA, and is obligated, therefore, to notify of any outbreaks of AI to this international organization, as well as its trading partners. No AI outbreaks have been reported by Ukraine to this organization, nor to any other trading partners, such as the EU, for example.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to interrupt. I only have a minute and a half here. To CBSA, we know our resources at the border are stretched pretty thin already in respect to testing products that are coming into Canada from the U.S., whether it's chicken or milk. And I'm just wondering, how do we know that the product coming from Ukraine is what it says it is? And has there been tests developed that will ensure that the chicken coming into Canada is in fact what's listed on the import certificates?
So if I may I ask, is the question in relation to the remission order or generally speaking?
Well, in relation to the order, but generally speaking, because we already know at the border generally we have issues and we don't have enough resources. So how much further are our resources going to be stretched, and can we have assurances that the products actually coming in are what they say they are in the order, in the certificate?
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Appreciate it. So when we are doing risking of goods, in this case we're referring to chicken, we do that jointly with the lead department, in this case CFIA, from an animal and human health standpoint. And so up front, there's of course as you mentioned, the assurance that all of the appropriate certifications and documentation to confirm eligibility and admissibility have been met, including for origin. And if there are identified risk changes in the risk environment from CFIA, then we would identify shipments that would pose high risk or higher risk for intervention at the border. I think from the standpoint of where we are today, we're in a good place in terms of resource availability. As you've heard, the environment has not altered significantly from a CFIA human and animal health standpoint. And so where we are is where we've been, and that is sufficient. We have focused principally up until now in the marine area of shipments coming into Canada, and those monitoring efforts continue and will expand to other areas as the risk environment adapts.
Thank you, Mr. Ban. Appreciate that. Just out of time there. Now I'll turn to Mr. Turnbull for 6 minutes, please.
Great. Thanks to our witnesses for being here today. And I think this whole study sort of seems to revolve on a bit of a hypothetical. I mean, I think to date, Mr. Rosser, if I were to ask you, has our supply managed sector been really impacted by the Ukraine goods remission order? Would it be fair to say that it's been minimal to negligible? Would you agree with that?
Mr. Chair, I would agree completely. To date, we've seen a couple thousand kilos of ice cream arrive, but no volumes that would be material to the size of any of the supply managed markets.
Thank you, and that's helpful. But looking ahead, we're looking at the next roughly 7 months till June 9th, 2023, I take it from our earlier panel. What impact do you anticipate that this remission order will have on our supply managed sector between now and then? Mr. Rosser, that's to you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the member for the question. We certainly have looked at this. I should preface my answer by saying just the nature of the situation is such that it's really hard to put a precise estimate on what's going to happen. What I would say, though, is we have looked at trends of imports from Ukraine into the European Union, other jurisdictions that have relaxed their input measures. Just given the logistical difficulties, given the shortness of time, given that Canada has no history of of importing poultry products from Ukraine, we think it unlikely that the volumes of imports we're likely to see over the next several months will be material to the market. That said, we will continue to monitor the situation closely and talk with stakeholders.
Thank you, Mr. Rosser. And I was going to ask you that. How much dairy, poultry, and eggs does Canada normally import from Ukraine in a year?
We have, we've had until the aforementioned shipment of ice cream, we had imported no dairy products in the past 5 years, and have, to my knowledge, have no history of importing poultry or egg products from the Ukraine.
Thank you. And I guess with this remission order, you've already answered for the past 5 months or so, but and we'll have to see the 7 months following. But in terms of the $5.5 billion of cash farm receipts in egg and poultry, which is what that industry represents, what do you think the loss of market share might be? I know that's hard to answer, but like, are we talking, 0.5%? Are we talking about less than that? What, 10%? What do we think?
Sorry, I'm having a little difficulty with the mute button. Again, it's hard to be definitive and precise. My view from what I've seen, like I said, in trends in other countries and so on, that it seems improbable to me that we would be talking about anywhere close to 1% of the annual size of the market.
So potentially a fraction of 1%. And you mentioned the logistical challenges. I imagine that being Ukraine, if you could export chicken products to Europe, it would be a lot easier to preserve the cold chain that's necessary, would it not? Wouldn't it not be a lot more expensive to actually export chicken all the way to Canada versus Europe, which I understand probably has some similar measures in place?
European markets would certainly be quite a bit closer, and one would think quite a bit cheaper to access from the Ukraine. I would only add, Mr. Chair, that my understanding is that the rule of thumb is it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for a container to ship from the Ukraine to arrive at a Canadian port.
So, I mean, I'd just assume, being a business person, that you'd probably go to where you could get the highest value for that chicken and not spend on the longest possible supply chain. But anyway, that's just my assumption. Now I'm going to go to Ms. Donohue and ask about the avian flu. So how stringent are the CFIA's policies and processes for ensuring imported products from Ukraine do not contain avian flu? Can you give us, I mean, you gave us some detail already, but can you give us more detail?
I'm going to pass that to my colleague, Dr. Kanwal Kochar.
Thank you, Kathleen, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the question. As Kathleen mentioned, for any new imports from a new country or new establishment, CFI conducts full inspections on at least 10 consignments from that particular establishment, and in this case, Ukraine. When the certificate is approved, full inspection will be conducted. When I say full inspection, it basically means visual inspection as well as organoleptic inspection. At that time, CFI inspectors also take samples for microbiological contamination, chemical residue contamination, and species identification. So at that time, only when CFI confirms that the inspection is satisfactory, the consignment is released to the importer. Should there be a problem with any of the consignment, CFI, of course, works with the competent authority and takes actions as necessary.
Thank you. And I understood that you
just
would
15
do
seconds or so, Ryan.
Pardon me?
Just about 15 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I'll try to wrap up then. I understood that you had said the first 10 shipments of export would be tested, and that there would be a risk-based assessment approach after that. Is that correct?
Correct. So 10 inspections from each establishment. So in this case, 3 establishments will be approved. So at least 30 shipments will go through full inspection.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Turnbull. Now to Mr. Perron for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for appearing today. Well, a lot of questions in a very short period of time, so please be concise. I'll begin with Mr. Rosser. In the last round of questions, you estimated the damages to the supply managed sector as being negligible. Of course, it may change with time. Authorization for imports are starting to get regularized. There's a bit of concern that there might be a major impact on supply managed sector as a whole by allowing these exceptions. We were told that the situation is being followed, monitored closely, and that things will be adapted in appropriate fashion. I've heard from your presentation that you've had consultations with the industry. Now, if all of a sudden there's an upsurge of imports, what's going to be the process taken? I'll try to answer as quickly as possible. And as I did mention initially, there's obviously some uncertainty as to what the quantities of imports will be. But I imagine it's not going to be a significant quantity or volume given the size of our Canadian market. Nonetheless, we will obviously continue to track this closely. I'm sorry, Mr. Rosser, I have very limited time. So you're not looking for major volumes. But if there is, how much time, what will be our time lapse to consult with the industry and make adjustments? You've said management, domestic production, and if there's too much import, well, then the system doesn't work here. Are you ready to act quickly? Well, as my colleague Kathleen said, we are going to be discussing with the Ukrainians when exports to Canada have been authorized. They will inform us of it. And we have discussed it with the industry. This is going to be very useful in trying to develop what the expectations are. Thank you. Now to the CFIA. Is it normal that an inspection that was done of a product shipped in 2019 not yet been granted entry for market purposes, obviously? I gathered from your answer that you didn't have an on-site site recently, but you have to depend on the word of the authorities. Do you have anything to confirm to you that they have the resources? We all give them the benefit of the doubt. There's no problem. But there's avian flu concerns right now. We know that there are many cases in Poland and in other neighboring countries, none in Ukraine. Oh, well, first of all, they're being bombarded every day and no power. So we have to be concerned about their capacity to have access to disinfectant products, veterinary services. I know it's a broad question, but try to reassure me that we're on top of the game.
Bonjour et merci pour la question.
Yes, well, thank you for the question. In terms of timing and timelines, given the complexity of the verification and confirmation system, when I refer to complexity, I mean we do a verification for public health issues and animal health issues. So from that point of view, it's not necessarily a long process. And in such cases, we had our pandemic. I don't like to interrupt you, but are you confident that? Do you feel confident that the authorities have the sufficient capacity in Ukraine, both administratively but physically as well? The inspections, you said 10 full shipments be sampled, yes. However, people who have a DNA test with the United States. It's still not done. So we're kind of concerned about the inspection of what is coming from a war-torn country. Well, thank you. But as I mentioned, our agency met with Ukrainian authorities on the 18th of October last in order to discuss this very issue and to get their assurances as to food safety and the various controls for animal health in Ukraine. The Ukrainian officials assured the agency that the norms, the standards, and the controls as to both human health concerns and animal health concerns are at the same consistency as our last on-site inspection, and meet the requirements of the certification process. They've confirmed this to us in writing after the meeting we had with them. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'm going to, I think, start with Mr. Rosser or whoever has some of this information. I just want to get a clarification on, I get the impression there was no poultry exports from Ukraine to Canada before the remission order. Is that correct? There's no history of any...
Mr. Chair, I can confirm that's correct, yes.
Yeah. And what does the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement say about poultry and other supply management products? There's just no language there at all? They're just not allowed?
Mr. Chair, I will turn maybe to my colleague Marie-Noëlle Desrochers to see if she can briefly elaborate. But as I think was described in earlier testimony, the agreement does cover a large range of goods, but it does not provide market access for supply managed goods. That's my understanding, but perhaps Marie-Noëlle can confirm.
Good evening. From a tariff perspective, Canadians could import chicken from Ukraine within the volumes that are set in our WTO tariff rate quotas. However, for sanitary reason, due to the lack of a certificate, there are no precedents of imports of chicken from Ukraine.
Okay, thanks. Now to Ms. Donahue, and about the 2019 audit that was done. So I just want to make sure that there were audits made of poultry establishments, poultry production sites. I was just curious because I thought there was no export-import action going on, and so I was wondering why audits would be made there, but I'm getting the impression that they were done in 2019.
Thank you for your question. So subsequently, after the coming into effect of the Canada-Ukraine FTA, the agency did receive a request for access for chicken and chicken products. And with that, we sent an audit team to look at 3 establishments in Ukraine. This audit was conducted in 2019. As was noted, in the subsequent intervening time, we did meet with Ukrainian officials this fall to seek assurances that they had the capacity and the controls in place that we saw and witnessed back in 2019. We received those assurances from officials. We also received, in addition, these assurances in writing subsequent to our meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I had a lot of questions, but I think Monsieur Perron asked a lot of them in terms of how confident we are, considering the state of affairs in Ukraine now. How can we be confident of the state of those production facilities, and in particular the avian influenza situation? I'm a bird ecologist by training, and I know the birds fly, and that if we have reports coming in from around the Ukraine, from Poland regularly, I guess I'm just a bit skeptical of a lack of reporting might say more to what Ukraine is capable of doing under the horrific situation they're in. But I'll just ask, I guess, back to Mr. Rosser again, because I tried to ask this to a previous panel and they said ask you, and that is more about the volume of poultry product that would have to come into Canada before it would impact our supply management system. And I think you partly answered that by saying there is such a small amount that's expected, but how much would have to come in before that system would be impacted, before there would be, for instance, a change in price to consumers or producers, or how that price system would change?
Mr. Chair, I'd just say, as described earlier, we haven't done a formal analysis of this, in part because it's very hard to estimate what the next few months will bring. That said, we have looked carefully at the volumes of production, the volumes of exports from Ukraine, and considered what scenarios are. And as sort of described previously, we just don't think that we think it improbable that the volumes of product that are likely to arrive will be material to the operation of the supply managed system. That said, given the uncertainty, we'll continue to monitor the situation very carefully and remain actively engaged with sector stakeholders.
Very quickly, if anybody wants to comment on the possibility that if we think about renewing this agreement, whether we could just carve out supply managed goods, just because there doesn't seem to be any market for that. Hearing none, we'll move on.
I just say that, yeah, we our assumption, our analysis to date has been based on the assumption that this situation will last until the 7th of June, and our work has proceeded on that basis.
Thanks, Mr. Rosser. Now for the final round, Mr. Lehoux for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for being with us this afternoon. My first question, Mr. Rosser, why would Canada authorize the import of chicken? I'd like to help Ukraine, of course, but, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul. Why would the Americans not accept their agricultural product, but we are accepting them? What's the rationale behind that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question, but I can't speak why the Americans decided as they did. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not Canada unilaterally improve the access for chicken or other agriculture to in the European Union and in UK, they've done the same thing. So if we authorize the import, given all the avian flu issues and other problems that Ukraine is dealing with, why not just import products which are cooked products and not fresh or frozen? Because if they're cooked, I believe that they would no longer be a threat to animal health. Well, as to animal health, I don't know if the other witnesses from the agency, I think they're better placed to answer that question than I. CFIA. Well, if it's the people from the agency, hang on, I'll ask you another question. Initially, you said that the 10 first shipments of imports would be verified from will it revert back to the past? The agency inspections, 1 out of 10 is verified only. Is that still the case today, the protocol for inspection? Yes, thanks for the question. Yes, this is the standard practice. Random check, 1 in 10. But initially, the first 10 import cycles. And why not just stick with cooked or processed product? All food sold in Canada is either cooked or frozen or fresh. Must comply with the Canadian regulations, and the 3 Ukrainian poultry producers satisfied these criteria. Thank you very much. I think I'll give the rest of the time to my colleague.
Did the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food recommend to Finance Canada that supply management be included within the exemption order? Or the readmissions order, I should say?
We certainly have ongoing dialogue with the Department of Finance. I don't recall us providing advice on that matter. No.
Would you suggest that it should be in there?
As I think that I only heard a portion of the earlier testimony from Department of Finance, but they described the process that ultimately led to their minister making a recommendation. We certainly, like I said, have ongoing dialogue with finance on matters related to agriculture.
Thank you for that. And I just offer the observation. It's a great time that we can reaffirm our support for supply management, and hopefully the department and the minister will do that in this case. But my question is for CFIA and Ms. Donohue. Do you have certainty that there are no cases of avian influenza in Ukraine? You mentioned that there haven't been any cases reported, but do you have assurances there haven't been any in the last year?
Thank you for your question. As noted previously, we have no evidence that there are cases of AI. Ukrainian officials have not reported anything to the WOA nor to other trading partners as they are obliged to. And
so on a risk-based...
we have no evidence.
So on a risk-based approach, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, we are comfortable with that.
You mentioned earlier that there were sanitation concerns and that you were provided assurances by Ukrainian officials that they had addressed certain issues. Would you accept the same assurances from a Canadian processor without actually physically inspecting the facility?
So we sought those additional assurances. In fact, after meeting with our industry, they outlined a number of areas of concern. And we then met again with Ukrainian officials to seek their assurances. And as I said, also received those assurances in writing. And as my colleague, Dr. Kanwal Kochar has mentioned too, upon receipt of any imports from these establishments, they will undergo 10 full inspections. So
Thanks,
based on that, we're comfortable.
Thank you, Ms. Donohue. Now to Ms. Valdez for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you to the witnesses for joining. Through you, Mr. Chair, Mrs. Donohue, your opening reminded me of the time where I had to complete my food and safety handler certificate and how important food safety is to Canadians. You explained in your opening the process at a really high level to ensure that food or supply managed products imported from Ukraine would comply with Canada's food safety guidelines. But can you clarify what the checks and balances would be for poultry that's imported to Canada from Ukraine, so the pre-entry to Canada, then upon entry to Canada before it gets distributed?
So thank you for the question. As Kathleen mentioned in her opening remarks, CFI has audited the 3 establishments that'll be approved for exporting to Canada. We have negotiated the official meat inspection certificate with Ukraine. And every shipment from Ukraine to Canada will need to be certified as per the certificate conditions, which includes public health attestations as well as animal health attestations. On arrival at the border, CFI will conduct full inspections of those certificates. But I also want to highlight that under Safe Food for Canadian regulations, the importers must have a license, a Safe Food for Canadian license prior to import, and they need to have preventative control plans, which include traceability, so that if there's any issue of food safety, CFI can recall the product. And if at any time during the inspection at the border or after there is an issue noted to non-compliance, CFI does take action, which includes recalls, or it could mean returning the product, or even suspension of the foreign establishments, dependent on the outcome of the inspection. So we have controls at prior to import, at import, as well as post-import.
Thank you. Mr. Band, can you explain what CBSA's monitoring or tracking process is when receiving imports from Ukraine?
So yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. We have the ability to monitor all of the imports that come through Canada at the individual firm level, and so importers are required, as always, to provide true and accurate declarations with supporting information. And so origin and all things coming from Ukraine as well as other countries is one of the core requirements. And so we have a very, I think, clear understanding of what's coming into the country and has been released into commerce. And we provide that information to Finance Canada and others, including Statistics Canada, for their reporting purposes.
Thank you. How long are the records kept?
They would be under the Government of Canada broader rules around information management. So we typically are producing them on a monthly basis, but they would be subject to the rules of retention of public records. So 6 years, I believe, is what it is.
Thank you. And in your opinion, are there any challenges with the process, or is there anything preventing more trade from Ukraine?
I guess I would say that, we're pretty comfortable with our ability to provide information, in this case to Finance Canada, and for sharing with other departments to assist them in the kind of analysis and understanding of what the current impacts are looking like in the marketplace. It's fairly raw data, but it is, as you saw with the ice cream shipment, that's our data that was used to understand the current impact. It is, I think, sufficiently robust to understand what has come into Canada from Ukraine.
Thank you. And Mr. Roster, since putting in place this Ukraine goods remission order, can you explain what you've observed in terms of the benefits to Ukraine that you've observed, given that the war is still continuing?
I guess I just only said, certainly when it comes to supply managed goods, the imports to date have been pretty minimal, but it does, I guess, create additional opportunities, additional market access, which may be of some economic benefit to the country. But like I said, to date, the imports, at least of supply managed goods, have been very small in volume.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Valdez. Thanks to our witnesses. We are past time, but I just had one quick question for Ms. DesRoches. I just wanted to pick up on what you said during your answer. You had mentioned that although through a great trade agreement with Ukraine, it does allow imports on supply management, but there haven't been any to date. One of the reasons you said is you had a sanitary concern with Ukraine, so no certificate was provided previously. Is that no longer a concern then? Has the sanitation issue been addressed that would now pave the road to now assign an export certificate for Ukrainian poultry? Or maybe you can say what was that sanitary concern previously, and has it been addressed?
The absence of a certificate, of a sanitary certificate, is not relevant to any specific concern. There is a process to make that happen, and our colleagues from the Canadian Inspection Agency can run through that process.
Thank you, Mary Noel. I think what Mary Noel was indicating is that there was no official meat inspection certificate negotiated with the Ukraine, and the process Kathleen outlined in her opening remarks. We did go through several steps, including audit of the establishment, negotiation of the import conditions, and approval of the official meat inspection certificate that gives us the assurance that Ukraine has the ability to issue a certificate as per Canada's import requirements.
Thank you very much. Thanks to my colleagues for great questions, and thanks to our witnesses for staying a little bit extra time. Appreciate the clarification, the information that you provided with us this evening. With that, I will look for a move to adjourn. Done. Adjourned.